So g'day, you beautiful, awesome people, and welcome to a impromptu review of Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection by Asper Media. So yeah, I kind of wasn't expecting to do it this way, but I did record a first impression review of this collection and had narrated both 1 and 2, gave my thoughts and all that and some gameplay, and then recorded some B-roll as well for this game. But when I went to review my footage for the first impression, let's just say I screwed up. It was kind of similar to what I did with Tomb Raider, but this time round, the audio in my narration was completely unsalvageable. So instead of doing all that fancy stuff this time, I'm just gonna talk about the game, what my thoughts are on it, and just have my recording that I did just as B-roll, and that should suffice. I mean, it is a remake of a shooter game. There isn't really too much gameplay elements really to explore if you are familiar with Battlefront or this particular type of gameplay. It's pretty straightforward. It's command points, you spawn, you kind of just conquer command points, and you go in, rush objectives, take out the opponent's side. La-di-di, la-di-da, that's Battlefront 1 really, and then Battlefront 2, as I was explaining in my first impression, but I'll explain here. Again, my history of Battlefront 2 is very, very minute. I probably have about an hour's worth of gameplay in Battlefront 2, and my first impression of it back then was I'm not really a fan of Battlefront 2, and with the remake, having played it again, I'm still not a fan of Battlefront 2, but I will cover Battlefront 2 when we get to that. This is mostly going to be more biased towards Battlefront 1 since I have an ungodly amount of hours in Battlefront 1, and I'm also in the process of trying to learn the speedrun for this as well, so you can kind of tell I mostly am looking at Battlefront 1, and I'm going to have more knowledge in Battlefront 1. So my apologies if the review is going to be far more biased towards the first one, but I do find, even in this collection too, it's the superior Battlefront out of the two of them. It feels more, I guess, more well-made, it's more well-rounded. It feels the most stable out of the two of them, and it feels the most remade. It's smooth. I didn't really find too much wrong with it, except for the spawn mechanics, which, even in my first impression, I was very iffy about it. And even when I played after I did the initial recording, it did grow on me a little bit. It's extremely similar to the PS2 version of Battlefront 1. But on PC version, when it was redone again on PC, or adapted to PC, sorry, it was redone in a way that suited the PC version. So on PS2, is what we have in the Classic Collection, is you click where you're going to spawn on the map, and then you select your unit. And it's in this rotating, kind of like Donkey Kong 64 with the tag barrels. You kind of swirl around in selecting your units, which is clunky, it's slow, but it suited the PS2. Sure, it's a console, you can't really click as fast as you can on a PC, it makes sense. But on a PC, it doesn't really fly. Hence why the PC version on the original was you clicked where you're going to spawn on the map on the right side of the screen, and on the left side of the screen, you got to choose which unit you wanted to play, so everything was laid out perfectly fine, like you would expect for a PC game. It was modernized, it was less clunky, it was faster, it was perfect. Yet, in the Classic Collection, I have no idea why Asper Media did this. This is my biggest gripe, though, with the remake, and probably my only gripe so far, is they demaked it and went back to the PS2 clunky version, and I'm not really too thrilled about that. But, as I said, you do get used to it. I just wish they stuck with the PC version for the PC version. It honestly makes sense knowing that this game is also on PS4, PS5, Nintendo Switch, Xbox, yada, all the console versions. The spawning method makes sense there. It does, because obviously console. But I just wish when it came to PC, they kept the PC spawn exclusive to the PC version, if that makes sense, because PC players are now dragged down again, and as I said, it feels like a demake when it comes to comparing the original PC version to the remake of the PC version, if that makes sense. That's the only reason why I bring this up. Otherwise, for console, when you're comparing the PS2 version of the original to the Switch version, PS4, PS5, and whatnot, sure, that makes sense. So yeah, that was mainly my big gripe. Otherwise, everything else felt relatively the same to the original. It did run a lot smoother, which is to be expected, which is great. There was no clunkiness, there was no glitchiness. There was minor little bits here and there with collision that felt a little off, but I don't know if that was just me being bad at controlling or what, but that was a little minor thing, a hiccup I saw here and there. Speaking of hiccups, there is still graphical glitches that the original PC version had that still exist in this version, mainly when you go into the AT-Ts, or the AT-Ts, or AT-TE, sorry, and you move around in that, the minimap absolutely freaks out. I'm hoping that does get patched, but it did exist in the original, so I'm not too sure on that one, but I really do hope they fix that. It's just a minor inconvenience, it's more of a graphical glitch. It's not really a huge game killer or anything like that, but it's just something else that I noticed. Audio glitches, there was a couple of them here and there. It's only really noticeable when you don't play with the music on, which I was doing mainly because the music in this game is the same as the originals. YouTube don't like it. It's copyrighted. But speaking of that stuff though, there is a streamer mode which is great, and it's also great for speedruns because it removes all the cutscenes, which is great because in the originals, the method was, even both when you're not speedrunning and speedrunning, you would play through the game, you get to the end, and you gotta mash escape to bypass the cutscene so you wouldn't get tagged for, obviously, scenes from the movie. So, streamer mode disables them, and obviously having stream mode off, I haven't had a chance to watch them or anything like that, but if it's anything else like I've seen so far with things being upscaled from 3x4 to the new widescreen stuff, I would say they've probably remade some of it, because one of the other issues I did have was, as I said, it's minor inconvenience, but I think this also happened on PS2 as well, was the map would have audio glitches where sometimes the audio would just never play for the map loading. And the map loading too is definitely all new stuff. It's widescreen now, as I said, instead of the 3x4 aspect ratio. Sound effect is definitely new, and I think they've redone all of the graphics for the loading screen. So I would imagine the cutscenes have been redone too, if that was my guess. Haven't actually watched them because I usually skip them anyways. There was a couple of other little visual glitches here and there, very, very minor, like usually some icons would jitter around a little bit, but otherwise nothing really, really negative to say. Otherwise, an experience overall, it was pleasant. It's exactly how it really should be. The UI I'm going to have to get used to because it's vastly different to the original for the PC. But if you want to experience the originals in a more modernized version, this is perfect, really. It's got everything what you expect. It's smooth frame rate, controls really well. I don't think I had any issues with the controls, actually. Other than, like I said, maybe collision playing up here and there. There was a couple little wonky little hitboxes, but that's minor. It's what you expect, really, for Star Wars Battlefront 1. You kind of get that here and there too in the originals, so it's something that didn't really inconvenience me. I've already sunk in, I think, 4, maybe 5 hours already into this game, depending on how many hours I spent on Battlefront 2, which I don't know, but I definitely know for a fact for this review I've already sunk in about 5 or 6 hours, so just quickly doing, like, as I said, the first impression review and then completing the campaign for the rest of the time just to see if there was anything that really stood out to me as a huge improvement or any type of negatives. But as I said, it felt like the originals, which is exactly what I kind of was hoping for when I walked into this remake. So perfect. That's all I can really say. Except for, as I said, the minor little inconvenience about the spawn stuff being completely different, but that could be just a nitpick from me since I've gotten used to the original PC version. And as I said, when it comes to PS2, it just completely makes sense. And then remembering then that this is obviously ported to console as well, which explains why the spawn stuff was changed, because it suits the console versions. But as I said, it's just a minor gripe. I just wish for the PC version of Battlefront Classic, they kept that, they changed the spawn to be, you know, PC exclusive, obviously. But I guess not. So I'm gonna talk about Star Wars Battlefront 2 now, just for a little bit, just because it's there, and from what I know of, as I said, I haven't played too much of Battlefront 2, so this is more or less still coming from a kind of first glance type of thing. It's interesting. Star Wars Battlefront 2, it's interesting. I feel like Star Wars Battlefront 2 could have had a little bit more polish to it, but at the same time, I'm not sure if they're being faithful to the original. Star Wars Battlefront 2 to me feels like it's not as polished as Battlefront 1, which is so weird considering it's the sequel. It's interesting because, you know, you have all these more advancements into how the Battlefront works. You start the first phase off as the units, you know, like your Stormtrooper, your Storm Pilots, etc., etc. And then as you progress through your objectives, you finally have the chance to play as a Jedi, which is something you don't get in Battlefront 1, which is a huge plus. It's fun, it's different movement, different mechanics, it's amazing. But having said that, it's no longer the command and conquer type of thing over the command points and focusing on taking out the opponent. It feels more like a variety of stuff, like they're trying to expand out and, I guess, introduce more genres into it to make it feel more like a Star Wars type of multiverse type of thing. I don't really know where I'm going with this, by the way. So coming into this, it's different for someone who's very biased to Battlefront 1. So the first mission is very similar to that of Battlefront 1. You go through, do command points, you then collect objectives, you bring it back to certain collection points, you then move to the Jedi, you then do more objectives, la-di-da, and then that's it. And then you move on to dogfights in space, which I absolutely despise. I suck at it, which is probably why I despise it. It's so floaty, it's weird. I don't like it, only because I suck at it. Just, I want to put that out there. It's a skill issue, it's probably got nothing to do with the game, I just suck. But you can bypass these, which is good. I'm glad that was an option. I believe that's also an option in the original. If not, I'm glad they added the bypass function. But then once you go on to the dogfight and you finish all that, you do some objectives there as well. You then go on to the second planet, and it was, instead of doing command points this time, you enter one command point, which is AT-TE has broken down, and then you fight off the monsters of that planet. They're the objectives. You take down, I think, 5 or 6 of them, and then you start taking down the CIS, and you keep doing objectives that way. But it wasn't focusing on command points, which is where Battlefront 2 kind of loses me at that point. I love the command point, taking and conquering and defending. That's why I fell in love with Battlefront 1. So, having said that, that is the main reason why, you know, I'm not a huge fan of Battlefront 2. The other thing I noticed too was, when it came to the overall polish of it, it runs like a modern game, but it kind of doesn't look like a modern game, if that makes sense. The UI feels very outdated. There's some graphics that feel very out of date and so 2000s, which is when this game came out. It feels like it's faithful to the oldness. That's not even a word, but we're going with it. I can't explain it. It's like, it's nostalgic in a way, but in a remake you would kind of think maybe it would be polished up to kind of suit the same design standards that Battlefront 1 had, if that makes sense. Battlefront 1, everything looks polished. Everything looks great. It's a perfect little present wrapped up perfectly. Victories and defeats, when they pop up on the screen, it looks fantastic. When you get a defeat or a victory in Battlefront 2, however, it looks like word art from a Word document. I honestly don't know how to explain it, how I feel. I saw it, and I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Battlefront 1 feels... It looks so much better. It's really hard to explain how I feel about Battlefront 2 because I've had so little experience with it. But I thought I just might mention it, that, yeah, I thought Battlefront 2 might have gotten a little bit more of a, repolished UI, but it's definitely faithful to the original. That's for sure. I'm hoping maybe I might get into Battlefront 2 with this remake. It was fun, don't get me wrong. I'm just still... This is not a gripe with the remake, by the way. It's just how Battlefront 2 was made. It's definitely interesting. But I will still give it a go, that's for sure. But I'll stop talking about Battlefront 2 because, as I said, I don't really want to talk too much about a game I'm not really too much experienced with. So I'll quickly go back to Battlefront 1 because there was a couple of things I forgot to kind of mention when we were talking about Battlefront 1. And the first thing you get tasked with when you start the game up in Battlefront 1, this also applied to Battlefront 2 as well, was the name KrimZen is not allowed. And my poor brain couldn't comprehend that. It comes up saying that the name KrimZen is offensive in other languages. Now, the only game I've had this happen to me is in Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. It was like, I think the very first one for the Wii. And it come up saying I can't use that name. Now, obviously, since the multiplayer for these games is 64 players online, so they're obviously trying to make it that it follows TOS and everything, names are clean. But I generally wasn't expecting that, to not be able to use the name KrimZen, so I had to resort to Kath this entire playthrough. So that was one thing. The other thing, kind of comparing the two of them too, was Battlefront 1, the settings and all that, really clean to use because everything is on sliders. But when it came to Battlefront 2, I kind of wish they kept with the UI design that Battlefront 1 had, because it's very, I guess, weird transitioning between from 1 to 2, because you go from sliders to, I guess, how do you explain it? The toggles, you click on an arrow to go up and down, but instead of doing sliders. So, as I said, it's just weird in certain points that there's no consistency between the two of them, making transitioning between the two of them kind of awkward if you haven't played both of them or you haven't played one or the other. So I guess it'd be the same if you've played Battlefront 2 but haven't played Battlefront 1. It'd be a weird transition going from between the two of them. I kind of wish they made that a little bit more consistent between the two of them. That's something I do kind of wish was a thing, but I do get what they were going for. They were going for more faithful remakes, similar to what they did with the Tomb Raider remakes. They were going for faithfulness rather than redesign the wheel. I mean, why redesign the wheel when the wheel only works, if you get what I mean? Other than that, I don't really think there was anything else I really need to mention. It's the originals, really. It's done well. As I said, just minor little gripes here and there for PC version, since that was the version that I'm going to be mostly playing on. It all makes sense from a console perspective, don't get me wrong. This on a console, if you wanted to look from a console perspective, it's perfect for a console. Sure, there'll be minor bugs here. I am interested to see how this plays on the Switch. It probably won't be the 60 frames per second smoothness, but it'll probably still run fine at 30 frames per second. That's my estimates, because this is a game, as I said, I absolutely love Battlefront 1, and the idea of being able to take this on the go with me, or play it in bed, or on the shitter, is great. I love that idea, so the fact that it's on the Switch I can carry it on the go. It's going to be interesting playing it there. So I really hope this Battlefront 1 plays fun on the Switch. If not, I'm going to be one sad Aussie, that's for sure. I love Battlefront 1, if I haven't made that clear, since this review was mostly biased towards Battlefront 1. Alright, sorry to interrupt here, but this is future KrimZen talking about a week after I recorded the first half of this review. Kind of giving an update since having played through my early access copy with huge thanks to Aspire Media. Yes, I know I've been saying the name wrong in the first part of this review and in my Tomb Raider review, but I'm dyslexic and names are hard. But anyways, I got the chance to kind of play more of Battlefront 1, which is why this review has taken a week more than what it should have to kind of put this review out. So I went through and I played Galactic Conquest, which is usually my all-time favorite mode for Battlefront 1, just to find out that, yeah, it's interesting, to say the least. I honestly found it actually quite buggy, which was honestly quite disappointing. It stuttered on loading. I even had a weird bug that never even showed me what the opponent picked, which, for those who haven't played Battlefront 1's Galactic Conquest, is you kind of pick a campaign. It's more of an instant action campaign, but with a twist. So you pick a campaign and you have particular perks on the planet that you start with. On a Jedi in, if you choose that as your perk. There is one that makes your unit spawn with more health. There's one that makes you spawn with your teammates having better AIs. There's one that sabotages the opponent's vehicles, etc, etc. So usually what happens is you go through at the start, you have one perk, and then the opponent has multiples. And then when you win 4 victories for the conquest, you then have the ability to overthrow the planet, or if you're a empire or something like that who has access to the Death Star, you can just annihilate the planet with the Death Star. It's honestly quite fun. Just continue on with the conquest and there's a planet missing because you've just blown it up with the Death Star. But that's beside the point. As you go through the game, it will then choose you, like you choose your perk, and then the opponent will go through it. It does a random selection of like what their perk is. I literally had one where it never showed me the selection point. It just cut straight into a staggered, a very laggy loading screen, which I have a decent gaming PC. It's not top end or anything like that, but it is decent enough to run this game at high, which says an awful lot. And the other bug I came across, which was honestly almost game-breaking, was I had the opponent literally spawn inside of a rock, which I have honestly never seen, even in the PS2 version or on the original PC version. I have honestly never seen that in my life playing this game. So it was honestly one of those, oh my lord, what is going on moments. So Galactic Conquest, honestly, it was buggy for me. It has had a patch. I don't know, like it's had a 20 megabyte update since, I think yesterday of me recording this part of the review. It has had an update. I don't know if it's fixed it. I've had issues installing this game. I've had issues updating this game. I've had to verify my game contents every update. So I don't know. I haven't booted up the game since, so hopefully it's fixed with this recent 20 megabyte update, but I'm not kind of going to hold my breath. I'm going to wait for a few more updates really before I think I go more into this game, especially for Galactic Conquest. As for the single player campaign, as I said for the first part of this review, it's perfectly fine. It's just a shame that the mode that I prefer, Galactic Conquest, was kind of a buggy mess. And speaking of buggy messes, I got a chance to play the multiplayer, which I obviously didn't get a chance to do with the early access review code because the servers weren't up. And I usually have a rule of thumb, don't play the online multiplayer until at least a week into the game's release, because I've had experiences with online with Diablo 3, Diablo 2 Resurrected. They're my main games that I've had experiences with online, and it never seems to work within the first week or two. So I've learnt That's kind of my rule of thumb. I don't do it. Same with Pokemon, that usually doesn't work until at least a fortnight after release. And same can be said with this game, which I honestly forget this game is a multiplayer game because I've grown up thinking it's single player because that's how I've experienced the game. I've experienced it single player mainly on PS2, continued that tradition with the PC release. I always forget this game's multiplayer. So you can bet your bottom dollar I was shocked when I heard that this game had mostly negative reviews because of the multiplayer. Now, I had a chance to play multiplayer, even though, as I said, I am not usually a multiplayer person. I honestly suck when it comes to multiplayer. I take the fat L's, I take the skill issues, which is definitely what I did on Battlefront 2. Battlefront 1, though, it was a smooth experience, except the part where team balancing was a little wonky. Often I would join a game, I'd be the only human player. The rest is filled in with AI, and then the opposing team would have 3 or 4 human. And again, obviously 4 human players versus 1 human player. Yeah, you know, you're going to get ganged up on, especially the fact that you have name tags pop up above you so they know that you're coming, which means, yeah, easier to game up on. And some maps, depending on which side you play on, is a little bit more overpowered than the other. I'm not too sure if that's because, you know, human players, small amount, that's how it worked. If it was like 64 versus 64 human players, may not be the case, but if you played on it's the snow level where you have to there's a tunnel that you have to kind of go through and fight your way through, and then your opponent's side has like kind of outside waiting to kind of take down all the enemies as they kind of spew out of this tunnel. Or you can take the AT-TE and just walk around that way and then take people out. I found that the opposing side that didn't have the AT-TE was at the disadvantage because literally the other opposing team would sit in the AT-TE, shoot, and just annihilate everyone, or just take the vehicles in and just spawn kill everyone. It generally wasn't a fun time if you played on that side. But if you're the person with the AT-TE and could come in with the vehicles and just sit behind the AT-TE, it was generally a fun time. But yeah, other than that, it honestly was a fun experience. I had no issues with Battlefront 1's multiplayer, besides some balancing issues. There was a little bit of ping issues, but I am from Australia, so that's not really much to go off of because Australia's ping, just in general when it comes to multiplayer games, if we're not playing on Oceania servers, we tend to have bad ping, which is always never a fun experience. But as I said, I kind of won't take that as a bad thing because, as I said, I'm not sure what server I was playing on. The other thing, though, I did find interesting, this applies to both Battlefront 1 and 2. Earlier in this review, I said that the name KrimZen couldn't be used as a profile name. Well, guess what? That gets thrown out the window because it used my Steam name just fine, which is Lady KrimZen, which apparently shouldn't have been able to use, but I did see some other names floating around that were quite sus, quite questionable, so I have no idea why the lock on the profile names is even needed, unless that applies for LAN, but I don't know why that would be an issue since you're playing on LAN. Well, why would usernames be an issue at that point? I generally don't understand why now there's a profanity filter on profile names, considering that online just completely ignores that and goes by your Steam name. So that was kind of weird. Speaking of Battlefront 2 though, oh my lord. I played 2 games, they were fine, and then after my second game, by the way, I took 2 fat L's, because skill issues, which is fine. So I could crack a joke here, this happened because of skill issues, but I should be a little bit more serious about this. 2 games, and then waiting to connect to host. Oh, you've lost connection to the host. 2 games is all it took, and I got booted. Now, that's concerning, considering Battlefront 2 definitely had the bigger player base out of Battlefront 1 and Battlefront 2 that I played. The other thing too is when I tried to do a quick game join with Battlefront 2, it kept giving me a lobby that needed a password, which honestly I thought if you were quick joining that would not be the case. It would give you a lobby that you could join ASAP without passwords. You know, normal multiplayer stuff that should be easily understood. Guess not. So yeah, I definitely didn't find Battlefront 2's multiplayer all that fun. I mean, when you got one going, sure, it was fun, being absolutely dogpiled on and taking the fat L's. As I said, I'm kind of used to it. I'm not a multiplayer person. I suck at multiplayer. I'm a single-player person when it comes to first-person shooters. And even then, I don't play first-person shooters all that often. I mean, I like GoldenEye 007 and Perfect Dark for the N64, but that's N64. That's completely different and completely irrelevant when we're talking about a PC first-person shooter. Completely different, but that's my experience with first-person shooters. It's basically non-existent. But yeah, it was such a 180 compared to the single player. I mean, Galactic Conquest was a bit buggy for sure, but nothing like multiplayer. I was like, oh lord, that's very concerning, and I really hope that gets fixed. I mean, I did the multiplayer probably a couple of days, maybe 4 days after the first day release, and it still hadn't been fixed. I mean, Battlefront 1, sure, it had some team balance issues. Battlefront 2 had that fixed because I think they blocked out the ability to pick what team you wanted to spawn on. It just was auto-assigned to team, and that was it when I tried it. So Battlefront 2 had an issue that Battlefront 1 didn't have, but Battlefront 1, the lobby that I joined, didn't have enough players to really make a difference. I mean, I could have been the only human player if I kept playing, which I think I probably put in 3 or 4 hours Battlefront 1's multiplayer. And even if I wanted to do that for Battlefront 2, I got kicked from the host, so that wasn't even a possible thing. So, yeah, definitely a half negative experience there, since as I said, Battlefront 1 was fine for me, which is my main game, so I was quite happy. I was a very happy little camper for that. But yeah, Battlefront 2, I really wish I got more time to play multiplayer without getting kicked. Other than that, I don't... As I said, I'm just going to be more biased towards Battlefront 1. But, as I said, I forgot this was a multiplayer game, so I forgot to throw in the warning that this was going to be more biased towards a single player of Battlefront 1. But yeah, I'm kind of glad now I did get to play the rest of the game outside of my early access release. Which was only just a single player, because I might even consider now doing more multiplayer for Battlefront 1 when that's a bit more stable. But that's if we even keep an online community for the Classic Collection, because now, because of this, everyone's kind of migrated back to the original PC releases for both Battlefront 1 and 2, and this kind of leads into the last bit, which I'm not technically smart enough to understand file sizes for games and why this game is as big as it is, considering that Battlefront 1 is about 10 gigabytes, I believe, and Battlefront 2 probably a little bit bigger. I can't quite remember Battlefront 2's size off the top of my head. And yet the Classic Collection is like 62 point something gigabytes big with, as I said, yesterday there was a 20 megabyte patch, obviously. But to why the game is as big as it is, usually my rule of thumb is if it's a big size game and it plays like garbage, it's usually not optimized very well. I would say most of it comes down to uncompressed FMVs for the cutscenes and all that, possibly uncompressed audio as well, considering there has been audio glitches, which when I was replaying the game again, I can definitely confirm that there was audio glitches in Battlefront 1. I have no idea what triggered it, but there was this horrible little staticky noise just randomly throughout the game. And I can't put my finger on what it is, but it definitely exists because it was on both my headset and on my PC speakers. So I would have to assume that the audio is being uncompressed. And even then, they've probably done a bit of a dodgy job on some of the audio compression here and there. Which, tell you what, the fact I've had to say negative things about this game near the second half of this review actually really hurts. Because, as I said, I went into this review obviously like really hyped that the single player side that I enjoy, and especially for the game that I enjoy, was an honest to God, pure, ecstatic, joyride to do. Sorry, I can't, as I said, it's so hard to explain, like, how excited I was for this game and, like, just how happy I was for this game to have done so well with single player. To then experience the Galactic Conquest, to have those bugs happen, to have the multiplayer be kind of a semi-great experience, probably leaning towards the below average experience. It hurts, man. It hurts to say this. It honestly does. And I really, really hope Aspire turns around and does a thorough job cleaning this game up to be the release it should have been near day one or close to it. Or at least day two it should have been patched to be the game it should have been. The game that we were promised. I really hope they turn around and make this the game it should have been and what people remember this game to be. It just honestly sucks that this is what we've been dished. As I said, it hurts, man. It hurts. And I honestly, God, don't think there's anything else I need to say. It's the only reason why this review has come out a week late is because I had to go through and thoroughly dissect Battlefront 1 single player and multiplayer, even though I always forget it's a multiplayer game. I still did multiplayer. I still went through and did Battlefront 2, even though I'm not a huge fan of it. I did the single player, I did the multiplayer. Sure, there's a Galactic Conquest in Battlefront 2, but as I said, I really don't want to report on it, considering I'm a complete pleb at Battlefront 2, so hopefully that works better than Battlefront 1's Galactic Conquest. But there's a good chance it's just as buggy as Battlefront 1, so it's just a guess. I also heard that the Switch version of this game, you know how I was like all excited that, you know, I can't wait to play this game in handheld on the Switch. You know, I play a lot of my games handheld on the Switch. I play Diablo 3, love Diablo 3 on Switch. I play Diablo 2 Resurrected on my Switch, and then because that's cross-save, I can play that on PC after if I want to, once I get sick of PC. And considering I work retail, I work PC there. I come home, I don't want to play on my PC anymore because I'm sick of PCs. I play handheld, I go to the living room, play in the bedroom, whatnot. Unfortunately, it sounds like this game released in a total buggy mess for the Switch, so I'm extremely disappointed on that front too. Talking about console even further, apparently PS5 had some really, really disgusting graphical glitches. I was watching them on real time for video, and even I couldn't believe it. Bloody Hoth was turning into Lego patchwork, and the more you went into the battle, it got worse. I just generally can't believe it. You know the Simpsons meme where you can point the moment that his heart breaks in half? I generally felt that the more I watched it. It just hurts, man. It hurts. Oh, man. But yeah, as I said, all I hope is Aspire turns around and makes this a more better game with future patches. And I hope it's done quick too, because otherwise, any hope that this game had of having a community based on it, everyone's going to move back to the originals, considering that I didn't even know that there was a modding scene for the originals that upscaled the graphics, made everything look more like a modern release. Heck, I might even look into it now after this, because I don't know if I want to continue with the Classic Collection. I mean, sure, I'm going to continue playing it casually, but whether or not I stick with it for speedrunning, or I might even just go back to the originals. It's just so disappointing. I think that's just the overall feel of this. It's disappointing, man. It just hurts from a real hardcore fan of Battlefront 1 and potentially could have been a fan of Battlefront 2. It just hurts. That's the overall TLDR didn't ask of this review. It's just, it had so much potential, but just, ugh. Oh, man. Even, like, it just pains me to just say that out loud. It just hurts, man. Oh. Anyways, I'm going to leave it there before I start rambling about how much I've already made it clear, but I am so disappointed by this. As I said, give it a go. Maybe in about a month or two. Sure. Or maybe pick it up on discount. But otherwise, it's just really hard to recommend the Classic Collection over the originals at this point. Pick it up on Steam. Battlefront 1 and Battlefront 2. And then if you're interested, that from there on, probably look at the remaster stuff. As I said, I'm probably going to end up doing that. And hopefully, later down the track, Battlefront Classic Collection is going to be the go-to. That's all I hope. That's all I can really ask for, is I hope later down the track we can turn around and say that this is a positive experience, unlike the first week of this, where it's I don't know how I feel about this. Anyways, again, huge shout out to Aspire for the early access code to allow me to play single player at least a day early. That, as I said, it was a great experience playing the single player of the Classic Collection. It's just, I just wish the rest of it was the same experience, but there's not much you can do, I guess. It's just, we hope and pray that Aspire does the right thing and does right by the gamers and fixes the game, and as I said, makes it a positive experience. That's all I can hope for. Anyways, hope you guys have a good day or night, whatever time it is for you watching this, and hope to see you again, and peace out, you beautiful people.